Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Type 1 Diabetes Family Center's Q&A. If this is your first time joining into our Q&A, we do this every Friday at 12:30 Perth time for our interstate listeners. And if you would like to ask us a question or share your Type 1 diabetes experiences or anything relevant to the Q&A, you can do so from inside our Facebook groups. If you are not a member of our Facebook groups, either our adults or parents community, what are you doing with your life? Head to our Facebook page, which lists all of our groups, and please join us. Let me introduce my lovely panel co-host, starting with the wonderful Carly Green. Carly, how you doing?
I am good. It's Friday. We love Fridays.
We certainly do love Fridays. And today we have Adam on the technology, so not doing the hosting. So a bit of a mix up for you, Adam. How you doing?
We fired him.
Surviving so far. I'm feeling very appreciative of Bree, who normally does this. I think we're all right, though I realized I didn't mute myself before. So if you heard me on the phone with Benjamin just before we went live, yeah, I forgot to mute. That's my bad. Rookie mistake. Sorry.
We are a well-oiled Q&A machine here at the Family Centre. Just before we dive in, I'd just like to remind you all of a few things that are going on at the Family Centre. If you are looking for more details on any of these events, you can find it on our website. First of all, we have our Parents Coffee Catch-Ups, which are an awesome opportunity to meet other parents who have children with type 1 and talk about all of the things that you don't talk to your clinical team about. Next one of those is coming up on Friday, the 26th of April at 9:30. We have our mothers group catch up. So if you are a mother with type 1 diabetes or in that process of looking to become pregnant, we'd love to have you join us at our next catch up. That's going to be on Thursday, the 18th of April at 9:30. The lovely Carly Green runs our Pilates classes, which are on Thursdays at 9:30 a.m. If you want to come along and see me attempt to do some Pilates poses, then you are very welcome. Parents of children with type 1, anyone, very welcome to come along. Carly is an expert at modifying activities for whatever capabilities you might have, even if you're as bad as I am. And finally, we have our next type 1 boot camp coming up on the 4th and 11th of May. Type 1 boot camp is 16 hours of everything that I wish I had known about type 1 diabetes 21 years ago. It is awesome. There's only a few spots left. If you're interested, hop onto our website. Carly, I think you're kicking us off with our first question today.
Yes.
Far away.
Fab intro, Benjamin. Well done. Okay, let's talk coffee. We had a post in our adults community about what coffee do you choose to have in your barista coffee when you order one? And it's a funny one because they can vary so much. Someone had mentioned that they go for oat milk thinking that, you know, that's a healthy alternative, but at the same time, they end up with this huge spike. So we've got a few little stats here of the common milk brands that you will get from your cafe. Predominantly Milk Lab is used, especially for our almond milk. So for a regular coffee, you're looking at 6.9 grams of carbs. For an oat milk, you're looking at 18 grams of carbs, so significantly higher, over double the amount of almond, which would explain the spike. And I'm just going off the regular amount of milk used in a latte. So you might be a little bit less, a little bit more if you're going for a larger coffee. And cow's milk sits in at 12 to 13 grams of carbs.
So there you go. Oat milk has even more carbs than cow's milk. That was a surprise. Now, as someone who drinks more coffee than water, this was a good reminder for me of a couple of things. One, remember that caffeine can impact your blood glucose even outside of the carbs that Carly mentioned, and it is unique to every person. Welcome to type 1. For example, I have caffeine in my blood, so apparently it does absolutely nothing to me. That probably has something to do with the fact that there is always a coffee in my hand. For other people, they'll find that it spikes their blood glucose in addition to whatever carbs are going into the milk. So have some fun experimentation by trying some different coffees and some different milk combinations and see what works for you. And Carly mentioned Milk Lab as an example of a milk that's often used in cafes. Really important to know what milk people are putting into your coffees. I know a lot of people use almond milk at home if they just don't want to bolus for the milk, because unsweetened almond milk tends to have very little carbs. The milk that's used in cafes tends to have at least a little bit of carb, and that's what gives it a bit of the fluff and froth and exciting
Makes it
bits. So
delicious.
exactly right. Well worth the bolus.
Yeah, and I think it's good to note that often people have their coffee in the morning, right? And there are other things at play. So hormones are often at play in the morning. People are getting foot to floor or still managing that little bit of resistance coming off their dawn phenomenon. So I know for me, I have all three of those in play. So I have almond milk, carbs. I know I need a little extra for caffeine, and I've worked that out through trial and error. And then some mornings you just find that you're just a little bit more resistant to that, but have your coffee an hour later, completely different. So it's a really common thing that's thrown around, and it's an everyday thing that we all deal with. So know that there is a little bit of trial and error to that process, but it's worth getting it right.
Take this as a family center endorsement for going and experimenting with your coffee. All right, I believe we are over to Adam for the next question. Fire away, Adam.
So I wanted to pick up on a post that came up in our parents' community about a week ago now, actually. It was a fantastic post from a parent it was the beginning of school holidays, and she said, letting go is hard. I just dropped off my kid to their first school holiday activity, and I left. Granted, like I checked in on BGs a couple of times on the phone, but they're on their own, as opposed to hanging around and being intimately a part of the activity and hovering, that kind of thing. And I guess I wanted to just really applaud that, because I get that it's really, really hard to let go, not to be there to manage every little bits and pieces. Because I know that was, I think, something my parents really struggled with, was the letting go piece. And I think I was diagnosed at 11, and so I was kind of just coming up on teenage years and really wanting independence, and that was just on the horizon, and then diabetes came in, and that was the end of that. So it took then a while for all of that, for the rope to get let out again. So I guess I wanted to acknowledge that it's really hard, and B, it's, in my humble opinion, as not a parent, I think a really important stage in parenting is figuring out how to move from the responsibility of managing your child's blood glucose levels to moving to, okay, let's have a conversation about how you're going to manage your blood glucose levels during this activity. What do you think you need to do? How would this work? When is it that you should call me? What questions do you have, et cetera, et cetera? What are your goals for this? And then trying to negotiate those boundaries. You're a parent, Benjamin. You got thoughts?
Oh, I love this post so much, and this is something that is not talked about enough. Our chair at the Family Centre, Peter Bennett, loves to talk about when his son was diagnosed. The experience, the way that he recounts it, is they taught him 100 different ways that he could kill his child, and that's part of the reality of type 1 management. And in the early days, looking after a child with type 1, you are focused on safety. That's your job, right? Keep your child alive, give them the insulin. And then many parents rightfully say, you know what, I want to shield my child from some of the realities of living with this complex disease. I'm going to take more of the burden and let my kid be a kid. And it's amazing to watch. But then we don't talk enough about how hard it is to pivot from, okay, there's 100 different ways I can kill my child, I'm trying to keep them not thinking about diabetes all the time, to the fact that our job as parents is to help our children, eventually leave the nest, although apparently that doesn't happen until 35, 40 now. And how do we prepare people for that journey? How do we get our kids to the point where we can say, well, I've been responsible for so much and this life-saving medication, and now I've got to hand that responsibility over and start to take those steps. And, as a as a diabetes society, we are not particularly good at preparing for that transition. We've kind of got a system that says, here's one part that's focused on making sure the parents can do all the diabetes management tasks. And then there's an adult system over here that says, good, you're an independent adult, go team, look after your type 1 by yourself. And we underestimate that incredible job that parents are doing, helping their children be ready for that transition, letting them go step by step, making sure they've got the safety net around them. And you can imagine as a teenager, teenagers don't want to listen to anything. And suddenly you're faced with, I've got to take on things that mum and dad used to be doing when I don't want to do any of that. I just want to fit in. So that's a really tough transition, and just hats off to every parent going through that. And if you're starting to face into that, then preparing for that journey, having those conversations early, starting to think through how do we get ready to let go and let our children out of the nest is really powerful. You don't want to get to that point where suddenly the adult system is saying, you can't come to the appointments, they're supposed to do it all by themselves, good luck, catch all of these things, and realizing that your child's either in a rebellious phase, or actually they maybe don't know as much about type 1 as we thought they did because you've been doing so much for them, or they've just forgotten half the things that they need to do, or, you know, serious time of, I want to fit in with everyone and I don't want to talk about type 1. So the more that we can do to help with that transition, the better. This community that we're all a part of is an amazing support for that, and can talk about all the tips and tricks and different ways of doing it, and little bits and pieces of advice. So reach out, talk about it. And again, hats off to all of you doing it, because it's a tough gig with my own kids and they don't have type 1. So amazing.
That would be a
job
really
you're doing.
interesting information night, actually, I reckon, for us to do, Benjamin, would be kind of, okay, let's have a solutions forum on kind of handing over responsibility to your kids. Let's just kind of get people talking about what has worked for them. So, you know, that the parents of, you know, maybe their 13-year-old kids, 16-year-old kids, 20-year-old kids, kind of just those various phases, what did and didn't work when they were going through those stages, and just kind of swapping stories and pro tips and that kind of thing. That'd be a fascinating conversation.
Oh, definitely. And it comes down to communication, right? At the simplest form, it is communication and how and what is most effective.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I know that, yeah, when I was that age, the kind of, what was the method? It was kind of like, this is what you should be doing, kind of the, you know, here's the gospel, go and do it, Adam. Did not work for me. Like, what I needed was okay, let's help you think that through. Okay, this is what you want to be able to do. Okay, let's talk about what needs to happen with diabetes so that both of those things can happen. Because otherwise, yeah, teenage rebellion. They just be like, yeah, whatever.
Oh, brilliant. All right. A reminder to everyone tuning in that you can ask your questions in our Facebook groups, or if you've got experience to share, if you've got tips and tricks about managing that really tricky parent transition, if you have tips about coffee and what we should be experimenting with next, I want to hear them all. Please post your comments into either of our Facebook groups. All right. Next question we've got, very practical question, which is, can I use expired Dexcom transmitters? Now, as a Dexcom user, I can probably guess where this is coming from. Someone has ended up with a pharmacy giving them a short-dated Dexcom transmitter, or you have used the wrong transmitter and realized you used the new one instead of the old one, and looked at the use by date and gone, woo! So the community's experience on this one is typically that those transmitters do still work well past their expiry date. But remember that if you are using one that is out of date, a lot of people will report that they don't last quite as long. And so when you see, look, I'm going to have to start an expired Dexcom transmitter, it's a pretty good reminder to go and make that order and get a new transmitter so you've got one on hand. The last thing you want to do is start your new sensor at 2 in the morning, or is that just me? And have the little warning pop up saying, we can't start this one until you change your transmitter. It leads us into a related question, which is, can you use expired sensors? And this one I would have a little bit more caution on. I think this is a Here Be Dragons question. It will let you. So step one, can you? Absolutely you can. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. This is a chemical reaction. It is a medical device using very tight tolerances to read your blood glucose. And if it's outside of its expiry date, we can't guarantee the reading's going to be right. You rely on your CGM. If you're anything like me, you trust it as the gospel 99% of the time. And the last thing you want to do is be going forward with confidence and find out that it's out of calibration. But we are all very practical here at the Family Centre, and we have all been in a situation where you have nothing but expired sensors. You can use one. I would really recommend checking the calibration, actually doing a few finger sticks. Yes, finger sticks. We all do them. We all hate them. Do them. Test if it's accurate. Often we find for the first couple of hours, particularly with an expired sensor, but generally they can be a bit wobbly. So maybe let it settle down for a little bit before you're making those treatment decisions, and maybe make a few finger sticks along the way. Carly or Adam,
And so,
anything to share?
well, I was thinking, yeah, just pop it on in the morning, maybe not at night, because then you got time to kind of see whether it's gonna work or not. You can do all those tests and stuff. Not that I'm really not taking my own advice here. Like, I'm the guy who does a set change at 11 p.m. and then or a sensor change, and then 2 hours after warm up, where I'm just expecting it'll kick in and my algorithm will take over, and it's like, oh no, sensor failure, go again.
Oh, have you ever been in a position where you've had to do a site change and a sensor change in the evening, like at bedtime?
Worst.
Yeah, stress.
Cruel.
So much stress. I've never restarted a sensor, but I have had an expired transmitter. Somehow I ended up with a demo, and it kept giving me a critically low battery, must change. I think that I pushed it about 5 days, I think, with that. And it had expired October, November, December, 5 months. So I think I got 5 months out of an expired, 5 months after it expired. But yeah, it was giving me those annoying critically low battery. And then when I called up to complain about it, they're like, you have a demo. I was like, oh, thank you, Amy.
Oh dear. Look, we've all done it. A reminder that, again, the community is amazing. If you do find yourself caught out without a transmitter or without a sensor, I can almost guarantee there will be someone who will be very happy to supply you with one while you work out where you're going to get your next one from. It's incredible to watch. I always have a set of extra supplies around, and I never get to actually give them away because the community has responded before I have. Adam actually just reminded me of something related to this, which, if you are using an insulin pump, which is using an algorithm driven by your blood glucose sensor, this is even more important because it is making decisions for you. It is giving you corrections. It is adjusting your basal, relying on that data being good. So if you do get into a situation where you're using an expired sensor, you're not sure whether it's reading correctly and it's driving your insulin pump, that's where we get a little bit of risk popping in. So I wouldn't recommend necessarily doing that unless you absolutely have to, and keeping a really good eye on blood sugars if that's what you're doing. All right, I'll hop off my little risk management soapbox there.
The CEO is coming through.
All right, let's dive into another topical post coming out of the back end of Easter. There's been lots of talk throughout the Facebook groups and the parents community about low sugar eggs and no sugar eggs, and the no shoe eggs that we spoke about in a Q&A. I think it might have been our last
It
Q&A.
just occurred to me, no shoe, no sugar. I only just got, is that what that's meant to be?
How long has that taken you?
I was like, what a strange name for an Easter egg. Like, what? Why?
Oh,
You've
It
completely
was like the day
derailed
that I
me.
discovered that afternoon was afternoon. That just like blew my mind.
oh my goodness.
If you have any
Sorry,
other words
continue.
that will blow Adam's mind, please pop them in
Yeah, please pop them in the
We'll share them
comments.
with him. Anyway, back to our originally scheduled programming on the no sugar and low sugar eggs. Every time this comes up, it generates a debate about whether we should be giving no sugar or low sugar eggs at all, whether people should eat whatever they want and just take insulin to cover it. There's a lot of passionate opinions about this, which I get. I think when we were talking about the no-sugar egg post, I find that most no-sugar eggs taste like cardboard, which is why I was so excited for the no-sugar eggs, because they didn't taste like cardboard. But we've had every post from these are the best things ever, and this is the only thing I'm going to eat, through to no one should ever touch a no-shoe egg ever. You should just have as much chocolate as you would like. And what I really wanted to remind people of is that everyone does type 1 differently. We always talk about the fact that there's as many prescriptions for type 1 as there are people with type 1, and food and insulin are tools. So some people like to say, you know what, I'm going to take as much insulin as I need to eat whatever I want. Other people say that takes up so much headspace, all the calculations I've got to do, all the thinking I've got to do about what I'm eating and what I have to match with insulin, that I'm going to take a substitute when I can and when I want to and when it works for me. We all know it's not just about the numbers. Otherwise, we'd all just be eating cardboard with no carbs in it. Actually, cardboard probably has carbs in it, so that's useless. I'll find an alternative. I don't know. We'd all eat, I don't know. What would we eat? Philly cheese all day? That doesn't sound very exciting. Something with no carbs in it. Anywho, that's a derailed conversation.
With a bit of smoked salmon, that'd be all right. Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Oh,
But
all day.
it might be a good opportunity actually to just give people a sense of what this actually looks like. We've got 3 people who have lived with type 1 for some time now on the Q&A, with 3 very different approaches to where they see food as part of their toolkit. Adam, do you want to throw in your view of the world?
Yeah, I mean, again, full respect to whatever you choose to do, right? But I'm definitely on the I'm going to eat whatever I want, and I've just figured out how to bolus for it. So obviously that's taken some experimentation and it's taken some work, but I want to eat the Easter eggs or whatever the food is that I want to eat, and so I've gone through the process of figuring out how to bolus that, or I go, okay, this is a completely new thing. We'll see how this goes. Here's an approximate carb count. I'll clean up the mess in a couple of hours, But hence, yeah, I'm like, okay, low carb is a tool, but I love my carbs, So yeah,
Can I just add for those at home following along, Adam will walk in many mornings of the working week with a Master's iced coffee, the big Master's iced coffee, and then I don't know, some form of toasted panini or whatever, and I'm like, seriously, how does he do it? Just walks in pure confidence. I'm like, how does that go? He goes, nail it every time. I'm like, that would not work for me, no way.
It's a good segue. What are you doing, Carly?
I have done a lot of experimentation. I think for me, it always circles back to, I guess, how it makes me feel, like food, and my health, and what, kind of makes me feel good, gives me energy. So I've definitely done the super low carb thing, and that worked wonders for me, particularly when I was on MDI. I just felt like I didn't have to chase my tail as much. Less insulin on board meant less risk for me running around with a busy schedule. What I found, though, was that I felt crap on super low carb. I'm talking super low carb. And then after having my DNA tested, I found out that my mitochondria, your energy cells, are fussy and cannot process fat for energy very well, which then explained it. And this DNA test can actually tell you what your body does use for energy. And so it was saying that I was suited to a high carb diet, which I've had to modify. So I lifted my carbs slightly and immediately felt so much better. Since moving to the pump, I have had a bit more flexibility with where I time my carbs, and it might be around exercise for me when I can take that. But I go somewhere in between. I use carbs when I need them for recovery and around exercise, and then I go lower carb on the days that I don't want to be in type 1 too much, or I know I'm just kind of running around, and I'll take the carbs at dinner time. So I'm kind of here, there, and I've experimented with all, and I just kind of find what makes me feel good and then what helps balance my type 1 around that as well.
Very nice. I can't imagine you being considered fussy, Carly. Anyway, moving on. I think I am the lowest carb amongst the three of us, and it's funny actually because you get put into a bucket and people think that I'm some kind of hardcore keto person. Actually, low carb is just my favorite tool to use in my diabetes toolkit when type 1's taking up too much of my headspace. So I know if I reduce my carbs down to reasonably low, and I don't go extreme, I don't go zero, I'm not a carnivore, but I will go to the point where I don't have to think about my insulin dosing as much because I know every time I do a carb count, I'm wrong one way or another. And if I'm wrong on something that's got 2 grams in it, then I'm not particularly wrong. And if I'm
Sounds
wrong
like
on
you
the
need to
plate
come
of
to boot
pasta,
camp, Benjamin.
I probably do. That's a very nice segue, Kelly. No, we're not promoting boot camp. We'll come back to that. But no, genuinely, it is a tool that I use to take a bit of the headspace out of type 1. It's not a tool that I use. If there's a food that I want, I'm going to eat it. I know how to do that. I know how to cover it. Very happy days to do it. But if I'm in a space where I don't want type 1 taking up all of my brain space, I know a bit lower carb means I don't have to think about it as much. I still do the catch me algorithm and leave the pump to catch up if I make a mistake. Again, the mistakes are a little bit smaller because I'm not taking in so many carbs, but that's just a tool in the toolkit. Big summary of this conversation, back to many things we talked about today. It's all about experimentation. It's about what works for you. And from the Family Center's perspective, we want to make sure that everyone has as many tools in the toolkit as they can have, and they get to choose whichever one works for them. So there is no prescription. Please don't tell people what to do in this space. We get enough of that already. What you do is awesome and great. And if it works for you, amazing. Experiment, work it out, try around, play with the toolkit, see if it works. If it doesn't, toss it. If it does, use the bit that works for you. That's how you end up in a place where type 1 is a little bit smaller in your life, which is what we all want, I think.
Yeah, and certainly share it. Share what you do because it can be helpful for other people in the community, even if it doesn't work for them, but it might work for them. So I think there's so much for us to learn and keep learning that the more we talk about it, the more little things that we pick up along the way. I've always said it, if I had kind of had access to the information and the community from the beginning for me, it would have saved me like 3 or 4 years of trial and error. And I'm a trial and error person. So definitely put it out there. It's all about kind of appreciating and celebrating what other people are doing and what works for them.
Couldn't have said it better. Looking forward to when Adam packages up the here's how I deal with iced coffee and sells it out to all of us because I want to know the answer to that.
I asked him about that. He said he doses the insulin and then he just follows his blood sugar trending down and drinks accordingly. And I was like, oh, that's too stressful for me. Way too stressful.
That's literally it. It's just a massive pre-bolus, and then you just drink to keep it where it needs to be. And yeah.
Wow. Okay. Back to the
So
we are not
stressful.
medical professionals. Please don't get our advice as treatment advice.
Don't take that advice, people. But hats off to Adam, who does this on a regular basis. Like we've all been there where we've tackled something high carb, high sugar, whatever, and it hasn't gone too well. But he does it on a weekly basis. So I'm like, he's nailed that, fine line between anxiety and enjoyment.
Yeah, pretty much. Rightio. Benjamin, shall we got time for my question? I have a question for you guys.
Go
on.
Throw
Yeah.
it in there.
So
Make it quick.
Rude. So basically this is when you reach that point where you kind of run out of energy to deal with diabetes crap. You're just like, I don't want to think about this. I think, Benjamin, you talk about this when you go see your educator, Amy. You're just like, I don't want to think about it. Amy, please solve this for me. Tell me what's going on here. So yeah, I've kind of got to that where I'm like managing the day-to-day, but I feel like I'm going to have to go back and look at graphs, and I can't be bothered looking at graphs to figure out what needs to change. I'm not suggesting we look at graphs. However, my question is kind of how many lows is too many lows in a week? So like how many lows do you have, right? So I counted the last week, 8 hypos in the last week. In terms of percentage low high, I'm currently 2% low for the week. And I feel like recently I've really nailed my time in range has come up to like between 89 and 92% or something. I've figured out these highs that kept having in meals, post meal, figured that out. But I think there's something happening afterwards that's causing like these crashes or whatever. But I'm trying to figure out, like, is that just like what's normal for the number of hypos? Obviously, you want to have as little as possible, but like, how many do you have?
And what's your low marker? Is that below 3.8? What is your hypo marker?
Anything under 4 and I'm feeling low.
Okay.
So can I give you the really nerdy answer, Adam?
Oh, yes, please.
It's almost the official Family Centre line, but what I would say is if a low is getting in the way of you doing what you want to do, or it's having a significant impact on your life, then it's too many. If you have 10 little skirts at the bottom that don't fuss you at all and you know exactly what to do with them and they don't get in the way, who cares? I don't think there is a magic number. And I get really frustrated by this question because if there are any diabetes educators listening to this, they probably all just fell off the chair when you said 8 hypos, because what they're taught is hypo equals crisis equals risk equals unconsciousness on the floor. We know the lived reality of type 1, which is that your blood glucose doesn't stay on a flat line even if you do everything right. The question is it getting in the way? You know, if you're standing there saying, I'm not going to go for a walk down the road because every time I do, I plunge through the floor and, you know, I will just not do that. That's too many. And that's 1. If you are saying it's happening every time I do X and I can't work out Y and it's driving me up the wall, that's when I go and throw something to Amy and go, help me fix this. Tell me what's going on, because that irritates me. But that's what I would say. It comes down to either is it creating a safety risk, in which point, yes, you know, if we're talking serious lows, do something
it's the
about
intensity of those lows as well. We all know that hypos induced by your background insulin is far different to that is induced by rapid insulin. So like for me, often I can bounce off the bottom throughout the night, but it doesn't affect me. But yeah, throughout the day. Yeah, a low after meal times, or if it's after exercise, then you know that you want something to change because you want meals to be enjoyable. You don't want to end in a hypo. Sometimes we have a hypo beforehand if we didn't quite get the timing quite right, but that's an easily fixed.
Yeah, it's almost like unexplained versus explained. If you know exactly what went wrong, why it happened, and what you can do to avoid it, then zippity-doo-dah. If you're looking at it and going, I don't know where this thing came from, it happens every time and I can't stop it, or it's getting in the way of my life, then problem. And that could be 1, 10, 25. It really just comes down to you and what's going on in your life.
Yeah.
Which is not the answer you were looking for, which is how many hypos do we have and therefore what's a normal amount. But I'm not going to give you that.
Refuse on principle.
Do a poll with the community. Fascinating
well,
question.
Yeah,
I'd love
it
to
does.
know.
Yeah, and it comes back to like, I feel like I'm in that space as well, Adam, where I feel like I need to pull my graphs and put my head into my type 1 for a little while because things seem to be going a little bit here, a little bit there. I'm like, oh, okay, time to pull out the graphs, time to pull out the scale, like time to revisit all of the skills because something's not quite right. And that happens from time to time. You got to do
Maybe
a little
rezhuzh. We could have a little graph party. You and I will sit down over lunch and just look at our graphs together. But
graph party it is. That's what we do here at the Family Centre.
We're so lucky to be able to do that. I feel like a lot of my hypos are happening before meals. Like my algorithm is like, I've just got you down to where I think you should be. Like it's just recovered from the last meal, basically. It's like low 5s, there you go. But then it overshoots it ever so much. And then before my next meal is kind of kicking in to save the day, which is obviously not how it's meant to work. Like I should just get back down to 5.5 or whatever and stay there. But
where's that iced coffee when you need it, Adam?
Right. Yeah, I've just got the jelly bean supply.
Definitely. Let's post that to the community. We can certainly unpack that.
Interesting to see what the norm is.
Absolutely.
Yeah, let's put it out there. Before we do close off, I just want to remind everybody of our new clinics in the South and the Southwest. We have the lovely Shana Critchett working in Coburn. So if you find that driving north to the Family Centre is too far for you, know that we have rooms there for your face-to-face appointments. Call or email us at the Family Centre Clinic and we will get that sorted for you. And then we have our lovely Beck Newton, who is operating out of Margaret River and Busselton. Her next clinic in Margaret River is the 19th, Friday the 19th of April, and Monday the 22nd of April, she'll be in Busselton. And then just a reminder, we are doing this Q&A every Friday at 12:30 p.m. Perth time. If you'd like to ask us a question for future shows, make sure you are in one of our Facebook groups, so either our adults or our parents community. And if you're watching this after we've recorded it live and you have follow-up questions, please pop them in the comments and we'll do our best to carry that over to next week. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
See you, everyone.